I want to welcome you to Whetstone Hollow. The story really starts back in my childhood, growing up in southeastern Arizona. We had public land everywhere, millions of acres, and in the little mining town of Bisbee, all we really had to do was go out and hunt and fish, and my father was a great conservationist. He taught us how to do those things. As I grew older, I continued to carry on that passion. Met my wife of 34 years in Phoenix in 1986, got married, had children, and passed that passion for the outdoors along to them. In 2003, due to a career change, our family found ourselves in central Pennsylvania. It was a huge change from going and living our lives out west, enjoying the outdoors, to living in an area where everything was green, covered with trees, and there was virtually no public land. We continued to enjoy the outdoors through fishing and boating and things like that, but the passion for hunting was something that was very difficult. After moving to Pennsylvania in 2003, we spent 7 years there. Our two boys grew up middle school, high school, kind of looked at Central PA as their home, and we did enjoy the outdoors. We boated and fished, but we really didn't get into hunting. Shortly after that, we moved to southern Ohio in the Cincinnati area, and it was at that time got back into archery, deer hunting, leased a farm. Our kids were in school at West Virginia. They finished college, and it became pretty clear to my wife and I that they were going to be living most of their time in the area, Ohio, West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, somewhere in that area. And that rekindled my passion for trying to find a place that we could all gather and enjoy. And that really was the stimulus for looking for this place we call Whetstone Hollow now. We spent 2 years looking throughout Ohio and Indiana and Kentucky for that special place where eventually the family would be able to come and spend time. Throughout that period of time, got a lot of help from my youngest son, who's a wildlife biologist, in helping look for that kind of property where we could hunt and fish. We found this little slice of heaven in 2016, and after purchasing it, really went about improving the habitat here for wildlife so that we could enjoy archery deer hunting, turkey hunting. The Cumberland River that's back behind me here is a tailwater off of Lake Cumberland. It's a trout fishery, which is really unusual for this part of the country where most of the fisheries are warm water species. We enjoyed fishing for trout out west, and to have that right at our doorstep here literally has been fantastic. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the history of this area here that we call Whetstone Hollow. Early on, Shawnee Indians roamed these hills here. This was a natural break in the ridge lines for access to the Cumberland River. And we find arrowheads and Indian artifacts after we disc the fields for planting food plots here. In 1798, the first land grant was issued to Thomas Lewis, and it was about 1,700 acres. It included this area right here that the farm is on, and over the next 50 years or so, his family grew in this valley here. They kind of subdivided the original property into smaller sections, and in 1876 they built a landing for steamboats that would come up from Nashville and bring goods in and take goods out from the farmers and the merchants that were in Albany and Burkesville. They came down a single trail off the ridgetop. It was about 2 miles long. It still serves as our road and access today, and it was all by wagon train. The steamboats would come in, they would unload their goods, they would go into a trading post and a warehouse, and then the local merchants as well as the farmers and would bring their goods down. They would buy and sell corn, flour, whatever they needed. By the late 1800s, a small community had grown down here called Whetstone. There was a small hotel, there was a post office, There were a couple of blacksmith shops, and many of those old buildings are still here. I've got pictures of some of the original structures here. On our property itself, we've got an old homestead that was owned by Doc Myers, and he had 4 daughters. Those daughters all married gentlemen in the area, and 3 of them still own property down here. It was built in the late 1800s. Hand-hewn logs built the majority of the original structure, and today you can see those in the fireplace. It's just really an amazing structure. We like to go down there. The property itself is about 365 acres. We've got about 30 acres of tillable land, although much of it, our son Zach, who's a wildlife biologist, has rehabitated into native prairie and wildflowers. We have bees on the property today, and we really enjoy each year coming in the spring. It's beautiful out like it is this afternoon. We're disking fields, planting corn and soybeans. We try to keep something available for the deer, turkey, and other wildlife throughout the entire year, and through the winter months, especially when the does are carrying fawns. The property itself is rich with white-tailed deer. We've had a number of deer that we have taken, bucks that we've taken here that have scored over 150 inches, with one that was on the property for many years we called High Top, that eventually was killed by our neighbor and scored 183 inches. It was just a magnificent deer. It's unique in that the river right here is a natural crossing, and deer swim back and forth across this river. We've got a nesting pair of bald eagles that are down river along one of these cliffs that we enjoy looking at the babies each year this time of year. But as far as communities go, the area, there are 2 small towns, Albany, Kentucky, and Burkesville, Kentucky. Burkesville's quite unique and famous for the fact that the first oil well gusher in the U.S. actually occurred in Burkesville, Kentucky. They were drilling for salt water that they would get salt from, and actually hit an oil reserve near the Cumberland River. And the oil into the river caught on fire and burned for months while it was on the river. It was a pretty interesting time. But as far as recreation in the area outside of the farm here, it's very rich. Lake Cumberland, which is just to the north of us, and this tailwater is formed from Wolf Creek Dam, is home to a U.S. Fish and Wildlife fish hatchery, a trout hatchery there. When the lake went in, the depth of the lake caused the water below the dam to be very cold, and it created a trout fishery as a result of that. U.S. Fish and Wildlife put a trout hatchery in at the base of the dam, and they use the tailwater for the runs to raise trout that are not only used to stock the river here, but also to stock impoundments throughout the state and adjacent states. In addition to that, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife and Trout Unlimited used a portion of the land below the fish hatchery to create a mile-long natural stream they call Hatchery Creek. It's catch and release only, artificial flies, and it's become an incredibly popular place for local fishermen to go in and have an opportunity to catch some very large trout, especially during the spring and fall spawns. In addition to that, we have another large lake called Dale Hollow, and Dale Hollow State Park is just south of us, about 20 minutes. Along with the state park, there's a lodge there, they have a swimming pool, and they have a very beautiful Robert Trent Jones golf course that is there and really inexpensive. So all of these things within 20 to 25 minutes of where we're at here, on top of the great activities that we've got on the property, make this just a really special place.